Hello, everyone. My name is Marcela Howell, and because we are using American Sign Language interpretation, I'm going to provide a physical description of myself as well. I am a light brown skinned Black woman, short Black hair, purple blouse. I'm wearing a purple blouse and a Black jacket, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. Um, for those of you who are watching, ASL interpretation is available on screen throughout the program, and you can find access to it also in Spanish simultaneous interpretation by calling the number at the bottom of the screen. And so let us begin. I am the president CEO of In Our Own Voice, National Black Women's Reproductive Justice Agenda. And before we start, I want to ground us in reproductive justice because we are going to be talking about the impact of a number of things, including the Dobbs decision, that is the Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, and what it means to people, activists, and people who believe in reproductive justice. So reproductive justice is the human right to control our bodies, our sexuality, our gender, our sexual orientation, our work, and our reproduction. As an organization, we believe that reproductive justice can only be achieved when all women and girls have the complete economic, social, and political power and resources to make healthy decisions about our families, our bodies, and our communities in all areas of our lives. So we're going to have some guests today. Our first guest is Brittany is on, and I will let her come on and introduce herself. And again, Brittany, if you will, give you not only your introduction, but also physical description for the ASL interpretation.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. It is absolutely fantastic to be with you, Marcela, and this entire amazing crew. My name is Brittany Packnett-Cunningham. I'm an activist, host of the podcast Undistracted, and an MSNBC political analyst. I am a brown-skinned Black woman with long braids and a pink tie-dye sweatshirt that in yellow writing says somebody's mama, which is something I know we'll talk about shortly. I'm calling to you from Maryland, which is originally Piscataway land, in a state that was built by our enslaved ancestors. And I am deeply grateful, not only to be in conversation with you, but for everything that In Our Own Voice does.
Thank you very much, Brittany. And I am just overjoyed to have you join us. So why don't we just start? We are now in a new era, at least for most of us, for those of us who are under the age of 50, which is not me, I should add. We're in a new era. For the first time in 49 years, women in this country no longer have the constitutional right to access abortion healthcare services. This is something that the Supreme Court threw Roe v. Wade out. And, you know, some of us were surprised. Most of us, if we were Black or brown, were not surprised because, you know, we've all been living under a different environment anyway, where those rights were always challenged. So tell me, you've been dialed into Black reproductive justice for forever. And so what have you made of this moment?
I mean, what I am clear on is that, and I should mention that my pronouns are she, her, and hers. So what I'm clear on is that because those are my pronouns, that this country has always been at war with the body that I am in. That as a Black woman, descendant of other Black women who literally fed the founding fathers and mothers of this country from their own breast, certainly without any pay and definitely without any acknowledgement or gratitude. I am very clear that America has always needed Black women, but never taken care of Black women. That our health has always been politicized and deeply political, that our well-being has always been last on the list, if ever on the list. And this Dobbs decision is no different, right? If we're clear about it, the GOP, specifically Christian conservatives who lost the fight to preserve segregation in schools and then hand-selected anti-abortion as their new cause du jour, those folks have been at war against Roe versus Wade for those 50 years since Roe versus Wade became the law of the land. I find myself a little confused that more people were not prepared, more people primarily being elected officials were not prepared for this moment, because the GOP has been very clear that this has been their goal all along. They were clear when they nominated Brett Kavanaugh. They were clear when they nominated Amy Coney Barrett and rushed her through to the Supreme Court. They were clear when they elected and appointed judges all across this country that would get in the way of abortion rights and reproductive justice. And so when people tell me who they are, I believe them. And there are people in this country that have always been very committed to taking down not only the right to access an abortion, but the right to reproductive freedom and justice more broadly, which includes, of course, the right to privacy. It includes the right to autonomy and to agency of oneself. And so there are lots of things that we have to be we have to be clearly in defense of in this moment, because the door was just abortion rights. There's so much more that folks are trying to take away from us.
Exactly. And I just want to acknowledge, since you did on your sweatshirt there, that you are a new mother. So congratulations on the new little one. How old now?
He's 8 months. He's 8 months. Yeah.
That's a precious age. I am a new grandmother.
Oh, goodness. Congratulations.
3 months old now. And I spend a week and a half with him just recently in California. It was just a remarkable day. And, you watch them, and I watched them from afar and was finally able to get, to see them in person and stuff. So we talk a lot about abortion access, but reproductive justice really is much broader than this. It's a framework that was developed by Black women in 1994. It is much more expansive and also includes the right to have a child safely and with joy. So how has the Dobbs decision impacted on that? It impacted on our rights to vote, to privacy. How is that hitting you differently now as a new mother?
I find myself so grateful for our child. And I also find myself in deep gratitude, because having a child is an act of faith. Having a Black child is an act of faith. We are living through multiple global pandemics. We are living through the last waves of capitalism. We are certainly being confronted with the fact in America that we were never fully a democracy. And to bear a Black child in the midst of all of that is an act of faith, because here I am bringing new life into the world alongside my partner, my husband, into a world that is hostile to him, but being determined to build that world of joy and safety that you speak about. And that is taking a lot of money. It's taking a lot of time, which means it requires a lot of flexibility with my workplaces. It is taking an entire village. It is taking a number of people who are willing to drop whatever they're doing and help us out. You mentioned being with your new grandbaby. Congratulations on that. You and my mom would have a lot to talk about, because she's in the other room right now with him, making sure that I have the kind of childcare that I need and can trust. And it requires flexibility and financial freedom on her end to be able to do that, right? We know in our culture and believe that it takes a village to raise a child. And that is an acknowledgement of community and resources that are necessary to raise a Black child in this world. And I have been calling on every single one of them, especially because my son was born 16 weeks early. He's what you consider a micro preemie. I woke up in the middle of the night, did some frantic Googling and realized that I was probably leaking amniotic fluid. So I called my OBGYN on the way to the hospital. She said, don't come to this hospital, go to another hospital, because there are very few hospitals in the area that are actually equipped to serve children that young if I was actually about to give birth. So I ended up on hospitalized bed rest for 8 days. I lost all of my amniotic fluid. The goal was to keep him in as long as possible. I lasted until the exact day that he became 24 weeks gestational age, which significantly improved his chances of survival. And he is an absolute miracle. And yet I am currently in the throes of what my therapist describes as NICU PTSD, in addition to the postpartum anxiety and depression. 116 days of him being in the NICU, of us watching them put tubes in his body and putting him on a machine to help him breathe and teaching him how to eat, and having to wait weeks until I could actually hold my own son in my arms and put him to my chest. That comes at a cost. The kind of birth that I wanted to have, we were talking about if we wanted a home birth or if we wanted a doula, if I wanted natural birth, if I wanted vaginal delivery, all of those things went out the window because the only thing that would bring him into the world safely was a C-section. So here I am, a Black woman in a medical situation and institution that was not built with me in mind, and I'm having to go through major abdominal surgery. So I say all of these things to say that I have found myself in the middle of this statistical reality for a number of Black women, that we disproportionately give preterm birth. And then we have to navigate an entire system that culturally is not relevant for us. It was not created for us. And so I had to do a lot of self-advocacy, a lot of advocacy for my family, a lot of advocacy for my son. I had to be clear with nurses and doctors about the way that they spoke about him, and push them to be careful about the words that they chose, because the words that you choose and the biases that you have will dictate the care that you give him or don't give him. I also had a miscarriage before we were blessed with this successful birth. And had I not been, had the fetal tissue not fully exited my body naturally, I would have needed what is medically termed as an abortion. And I need to live in a place where that is safe to do. The other day, I needed emergency contraception because I'm on a progesterone only pill. And because I had such a traumatic birth, my doctor's been very clear that we cannot have another child for another 12 to 18 months. And so I missed one pill, and the rules are very clear. I needed to go and take a plan B. Well, I live in a place where I could get on the Target app and have somebody pick that up and deliver it right to my front door. But what I know to be true for many of my sisters, my non-binary siblings, my trans siblings, is that they do not have the same access. I am able to live and build a safe, joyful, affirming life for my child because I have access to a number of resources and privileges that are not universal. And that right there is proof positive that we do not have the kind of reproductive justice that we all deserve.
And that is the reality. I mean, the reality is, even when Roe was in its existence,
absolutely,
for Black women, Roe was the floor, not the ceiling, because so many of us lived in states that were determined to stop us from having that access. And for those Black women and birthing people who got their health insurance through Medicaid, 3 years after Roe was decided in 1973, they were faced with the fact that the federal government decided that their health care coverage could not cover abortion care. Therefore, their full reproductive health services were curtailed there because some politicians decided this was something they would do with an amendment on, the funding bills that actually fund Medicaid.
That's right.
And it didn't matter which party was in charge. because that
Mhm.
funding restriction has continued from 1976 to now.
That's right.
And we've had moments where the White House, the House of Representatives, and the Senate have been in Democratic hands and what we would then term more supportive hands,
Mhm.
where they still impose those restrictions. And then states started imposing those
That's right.
restrictions. And the states that now have these abortion bans are also the states that have imposed these voting restrictions. And so my next question is, how do you see the linkage between reproductive justice, that is abortion bans that are
Mhm.
happening in states, and voting restrictions, and the attacks on LGBTQ people in those same states?
They're three legs of the same stool. So I started my podcast with a feminist media collective called the Meteor in August 2020. So we got our equipment together. We figured out how to do all of this from home, and we started in the middle of a pandemic, right ahead of what we know to be a very consequential election, not just at the national level, but locally and statewide as well, because we wanted to connect the very dots that you're talking about. And we wanted to do so urgently. Our first guest was Cecile Richards, the former head of Planned Parenthood. We've been talking about abortion and abortion access from the very beginning. We had folks like Chase Strangio, a trans lawyer, who helped us connect those dots about the anti-trans legislation that are pieces of legislation that are not new, that have been going on for years, to help us understand how these dots connect. We had people on like LaTosha Brown, who's been fighting for protecting voting rights, not just for Black folks, but for everybody, because that is supposed to be the bedrock of this so-called democracy, from the very beginning, and in all of the Black and rural places that people forget where we exist. And we've been deliberately having these kinds of conversations with those kind of folks, people like Renee Bracy Sherman, who works on people telling their abortion stories, people like Michelle Colon, who is from Mississippi and has been a longtime defender of the Pink House, right? Which is, of course, the clinic that was in question during that Supreme Court decision. We've been having these conversations from the very beginning so that folks would understand, A, that an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us, right? That if you are not free, then I am not free. And if we do not understand that at base, then we are not going to be able to achieve liberation together. But two, we really wanted people to understand that the kind of culture war that specifically the GOP has been putting on, and that frankly, not enough Democrats have been clear about fighting against, that culture war is coming at a real cost to marginalized people across the country, to Black folks, to brown folks, to LGBTQ folks, to disabled people, to poor people, to indigenous people. That we are the ones who have been seeing our rights eroded in urgent and very quick ways at the state level, at the local level, and not nearly protected like they need to be at the national level. And when you connect all of those dots, what you see are communities that ultimately will lack agency. Right? So we get into a fury about the things that are happening to us because we should. And then what is the refrain? Go vote about it. Well, if in your state you cannot vote safely, people are intimidating you out of your vote. People are pushing you off of the voting rolls, off of dubious things like a lack of signature match. People are taking away your ability to mail in your vote when we're still in the middle of a pandemic and disabled and elderly people need that kind of access. When there's only one polling place by your reservation or by your Indian territory or in your community, and you need to be able to take off work to take several buses to get to the polling place. All of these kinds of tactics of voter suppression make it difficult for us to make our voices heard at the ballot box, to take people out of office that are not in favor of us. So then what happens? We continue to see the kind of laws that dismantle our communities, that dismantle our families, that harm our young people, passed and passed and passed. And folks will say, they'll just throw their hands up and say, well, it's a democracy and the majority ruled. No, what is happening is that a ruthless minority of voices is trying to take over all of the things that matter to us. They are trying to dial back rights in order to maintain a Christian nationalist, Eurocentric, white supremacist, patriarchal, heteronormative state. And yes, I used all of the woke words because they know precisely what they're doing. And they want to try to take away our ability and the language that we use to describe precisely what is happening to us. We know what Zora Neale Hurston said, that if you're silent about your pain, they will kill you and say that you liked it. Well, we're not going to be silent about our pain. We've never been silent about our pain. And we will continue to use every single tool we have, yes, at the ballot box, but so many beyond: protest, organizing, fundraising, protection, freedom fighting, abolition, doing the kind of mutual aid work that we know matters, the kind of work that you all do, right, to make sure that people can access the health care and the abortion care that they need, irrespective of where they are, that their travel funds are covered, that their hotel funds are covered, that they can do so safely, that they won't lose their job when they do that. All of those things are the things that we will continue to employ because we understand how broad the attack is against our rights and how intentional and effective so many of our opponents have unfortunately been.
Well, I would love to keep talking to you. But we do have a couple of other guests we have to bring on. And, you know, I just thoroughly enjoyed everything. Can we put up her podcast information again so that everybody can see? Check out Brittany's weekly podcast, Undistracted. And who are you having on this week?
Oh goodness, we last week we had on Andrea Ritchie and Wesley Lowery. We were talking about police, prison, and jail abolition and inviting people into that work. I myself am somebody who've evolved in that understanding. And so I want to invite people to do the same. This week, we are talking about MPV, which is more commonly known as monkeypox. We're talking about COVID. We're talking about how to build communities of care. And so we spoke with two folks, Dr. David Johns and Dr. Monica Gandhi. One is in public health, one is in education and queer rights, because we want to make sure that we're caring for each other, even if our institutions don't care for us.
Well, again, thank you very much, Brittany. And again, congratulations on becoming a new mother. And I am glad that your mother is in that other room, helping to give you that care and the rest that you need. And we will welcome you again anytime you want to come on and talk to us about some of the various issues that reproductive justice covers. And again, thank you very much for being able to join us today.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you to you and the guests that are coming for making sure we all get free.
Thank you. So we are now going to do a little transition into talking about the state of reproductive justice with two amazing reproductive justice experts who are going to join us, talk a little bit about what they're doing in their states, what they're doing nationally. So I want to welcome Paris Hatcher, who is the Executive Director of Black Feminist Future, and Deon Haywood, who is like my hero, Shiro, who is the Executive Director of Women with a Vision. And I'm going to ask each of you to actually introduce yourself and give a physical description for the ASL interpretation that we're using today. So, Paris, why don't you start?
Hey, y'all. Hey, everybody. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
I hope so. My name is Paris Hatcher. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am a light-skinned Black woman with blonde locks. I have on a red-orange lip and a white top. And my background is red-orange, and it has a megaphone that says abortion is freedom. I'm calling in today from Atlanta, Georgia, and excited to be in conversation with these two greats.
Okay. And Deon? Deon, are you, maybe you're, we can't hear you. Talk again. No, you are on mute. I hope it's not us, I don't think. Well, we just lost Deon. So what we're going to do is try and get Deon back. Oh, there she is back on camera, but we still can't hear her. So we're going to try and fix your sound. And while we're doing that, I'm going to go to Paris, and we're going to just, so Paris, tell me a little bit about what your life has been like over the last few months since the Dobbs decision, and how it's affected you and your work.
Yes. Well, first, I want to thank you, Marcela, for having me to be in this conversation. I think I would say for the last several years, we've had this impending doom around the ending of Roe, and just the reality that we were seeing the strategy on the right coalesce with the electing of terrible candidates on the state and local level, as well as a somewhat 45. I can't even really acknowledge his presidency, but he was elected, and what that meant for the country in a variety of ways, and what that meant with the people that were appointed to the Supreme Court. We saw this happening. We saw this aligning, and what that has meant is that now we're living in a reality that is absolutely it's devastating. I think devastating is really truly one of the only words to talk about it. We already did not have enough access, right? Our people were already living in communities where there were not enough, they didn't have the abortion or healthcare that they needed. So now in most of the places, especially where Black people live, there are bans, and we are meeting the needs of our communities. In particular, we think it is an important time to make sure that every Black person, in particular Black people who are serious around Black liberation, around being in service to their community, to know how to make sure that folks can get the abortion care that they need, whether that be on their own terms or that they have to leave the state. Unfortunately, this is again, I tell people this is a public health crisis. This is a racial justice crisis. This is a democracy crisis. It's a crisis on every front. And because we've been already on the front lines of all these struggles, we are continuing to do this important work, but it is devastating and really trying.
So, Deon, we still don't hear you. We're gonna get that fixed, because we really need to hear from Deon, and we aren't able to at the moment, but let's keep going. So, Paris, tell me some of the ways that you would see reproductive justice linked directly to other fights that are going on, not just around abortion rights, but other kinds of justice fights that are going on right now.
Yes, I think one of the gifts of the reproductive justice framework and the movement is that it is intersectional, right? And that we have an analysis that, Black feminisms really undergirds how we understand reproductive justice. And what Black feminisms allows us to understand is that we are not just living, as Audre Lorde tells us, single issue lives, that it is actually at the intersection where those of us who are most marginalized, right, those of us who are most shut out of access and resource are really, we are really living at the intersection of not just abortion bans, but we also are living at the intersections of our voting rights and the disenfranchised, us not being allowed to vote, right? And being locked out at the ballot box. That's happening by elected officials, by redrawing of maps, by making it really difficult for people to access through changing laws, by closing precincts, making them inaccessible. We also can see that the attacks around queer and trans people as well, is that the attacks on parents, the attacks on queer people just living themselves and in their dignity. We should see this as a fight around the fight of our body, right? And that our body is a political site. And abortion is as much of, it's not about the procedure as much, it really is around power and control. So when we talk about voting rights, when we talk about LGBTQ rights, when we talk about education and what people are taught in schools, or even, you know, we see what's happening around real education, the facts of this country being taught, like the reality, right?
Mhm.
Not a whitewashing. This is around power and control, controlling the narratives that allow those who are in power to remain in power, to use power and control to allow, we know that when it comes to being able to create the families that we want, when you're not able to do so, it really does rearrange your life, right? So this is around power and control. If you're not able to prolong or pace when you want to plan your family, when you don't have the resources that you need, it really destabilizes your life. And so we should see this as an attack on our bodies, on our communities, and not just on a procedure or one particular community.
So one of the things that I have been concerned, Deon is back.
I apologize.
Hear her.
What was happening?
Thank you, Deon. I'm so happy. So Paris and I have been talking about how the impact of the Dobbs decision has impacted work that you're doing, and also how it has impacted the other work, not just around reproductive health, but other things like voting rights and LGBTQ rights. So first of all, Deon, can you introduce yourself to our audience, and remember to do a physical introduction description of yourself as well?
Hi, everyone. I apologize for earlier. So my name is Deon Haywood. I go by she, her, hers. And I'm the executive director of Women with a Vision here in New Orleans. I have on a hot pink shirt and hot red lips with black rimmed glasses and short locks.
So, Deon, you are one of our great reproductive justice experts. So tell me how the Dobbs decision has impacted the work you're doing in Louisiana, and what it means for the people that you represent and have been working with.
Yeah, so it's like you all said earlier, we all knew it was coming. I knew it would be difficult. I just didn't know it would be this difficult. We have here in Louisiana, not only are we fighting the same fights, I don't know if many of you saw, but Louisiana ranked second to last in terms of being a safe place or a good place to raise children. So it's interesting that we were being forced to have children, especially in a state like Louisiana that's poor. It's made it really difficult, even politically motivated in terms of our attorney general. They're talking about, well, they are going to hold back flood money during hurricane season because New Orleans is choosing not to prosecute anyone or bring charges or seek out anyone or surveil anyone. New Orleans has been doing a good job. We can't say that for the rest of the state. That's pretty much always the case, but to the point now where our attorney general is using terms like we have to use every tool we have to make them heal. Now, people are surprised by this, but people like us are not. I'm not, because, we're a reproductive justice organization that has a heavy focus on criminalization. And we just foresee devastating results from this moment. It's been my greatest fear is that, putting people, a whole city that has experienced a natural disaster like we have with Hurricane Katrina, putting us in a position to be flooded out again and saying, we're not coming to get y'all, we're not helping y'all. And it's not missed on me that New Orleans is predominantly Black.
Exactly.
So these are the ways that we think, that I think the targeting of the people that I've worked with is just continuing, is just visible for all to see in ways that they didn't see last year, the year before. Everybody always thinks we're basically just talking crap and making this up. And now people are seeing like, oh no, wait, they're after all of us. It's not just Black people anymore or queer people anymore. it's everybody. So I feel like the veil has been pulled completely off. And people are starting to see, but at what cost and at what rate are we going to be able to fix what's broken?
Okay. So each of you do work in trying to encourage people to come out and vote. So I'm curious as to what kind of response you are currently getting from people when they see, the Supreme Court overturned a 49-year-old constitutional right. They're seeing their states basically ban abortion, or pretty much limit abortion access. They're seeing these attacks on LGBTQ people in terms of policies. They're seeing voting rights being curtailed. What do you tell people about the reasons they should come out and vote now? And this is for both of you.
Okay. So I've been trying to, lately we've been just using this moment as the truth and why you should get involved, right? Also acknowledging why people don't vote, right? Like acknowledging the pain that many people in our community, or the lack of hope that anything will change. Just using this moment as this is our opportunity to make a difference. This is our opportunity to speak up. This is and saying to people, let's use this moment to really make our voices heard and either get rid of people who we need to get rid of or help put people in office who we need to have in office. And just using this moment as an educational tool and connecting it to our history, right? Of how voting rights have helped over the years, over the decades that we've had voting rights, but really just using this moment to help people see why and how they can get involved and connecting it to all the things we're seeing in Louisiana around housing, flooding, hurricanes, juvenile justice, like being able to connect it to everything and use this moment as a rallying cry for people to get out and vote.
Okay. So
Yeah.
Paris,
Mhm.
reproductive justice is grounded in human rights and in Black feminist theories. So, as an organization that really works on Black feminism, tell me a little bit about how you see that connected to encouraging people to vote.
I think there's a couple things. I want to build on what Deon is saying. We are people, like we are our people, right? I'm no different than I am a member of my organization. I'm no different than my members, right? Than our members. I have to be real right now. It is very hard to be inspired. I'm not going to start talking as if I don't know what's happening in the world, as if I see that the parties that there's a party, like it feels like they're both out to kill us, right? And so it's very difficult to say, hey, you should absolutely do this and don't question it. What we do is that we talk about, like, how do you vote like a Black feminist? And we say, number one, you have to ask the critical questions, right? This is not about party lines, right? If anything, what we need to know is that the democratic process is 365, right? It's like 24/7. It's all year round. So it's not just about voting this person in. It's also holding them to task. It's saying, what are you doing to bring Brittany Griner home? Right. So we're making the connections between not only voting, right? Because I think that it is important, but it's important, right? People know about that's the way that I can participate, but also how do we hold people accountable? So for us, what we're really excited in is that how do we talk about with folks that stay involved for the long haul? So let's say, you know what, you're not feeling it. You're not feeling these candidates, right? There's some really exciting candidates that are running across the country. I live in Georgia. There's a really exciting historic race that's happening here that will get people motivated and excited. But I got to tell you, nationally, these candidates are not helping. So it's our job to say, listen, if you want us to come out, if you're depending especially on Black women to show up as a big vote, What are you going to do? And I think girded by Black feminists, we think about the history of Black feminists from we have Chisholm, we have Baker, we have so many people who have said, this is how we get it done. Not only vote for them, but hold them accountable. So that is what I'm really excited about, is holding these folks accountable. And so maybe this year is trying for you to show up, but I can tell you, if you don't want to show up, you can still turn up. And it actually makes the turn up even better when you are coming from your district, right? And you can say, I voted for you, right? So like make the turn up count even more, to be like, I voted for you. And I'm here to talk to you about what you have done and what you have not done, right? Because right now we need a lot more. Cancel student debt, right? We need child care for all. We need universal health care. And we're not just gonna take the little sound bites. We need action.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's say I liked what you said, Paris, about being a member. You're a member of your own organization. So as a member, you're having a hard time being inspired. And each election, when candidates come around and they make all these promises and stuff, and, some of them inspire you, some of them don't. But one of the things we also have to try and do is to get Black women to run, to get them to want to participate in that system, which is really hard because it's difficult. If you're not inspired to vote, it's difficult to put your life on hold to run as a candidate and to raise the money. So how do we do that as well? Because the reality is, we want to be able to vote for people who agree with our values, who are of us, who believe in us, who trust us, and to make our own kinds of decisions, to run our own lives, to really know what's best for our families. How do we get people to even want to step into that? Because it is a hard thing. And we've seen some of our best candidates getting attacked.
It is Deon, please go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Excuse me. I think that is a huge commitment to make.
Yeah.
We have some incredible Black women leaders who've stepped up in that way. The reality is that we need more, so that there's a critical mass, so that they are not alone and they're not targeted. I think about Cori Bush, who is a true inspiration, who has been led by her community and by her values, and has made some hard lines and made some really important decisions that have been really incredible. I think about folks who are on the state level. I think the part of it is politics is a game. And I think it's oftentimes a game that we feel in conflict between what can I commit to, right? And then what will I have to agree to make the deals that I need to? And I think there are programs that are training people up, right? Like, how do you run? But I think the part that's oftentimes missing is, how do you also deal with that conflict of, these are my values, this is what I want. And then also I have to make deals with people. Like, we are literally exchanging X, Y, and Z. And sometimes it's going to be really difficult to explain, I made this decision because I had to do this to your community. So I think that is actually, yes, it's the money, it's the barrier. It's like, it requires so much money to run. So that's a huge barrier. And then I think some of our Black women leaders are incredibly principled. And some of the lines that we would have to make, I think would make it, I can't do that, right? Like, I do not align with this person. I cannot vote with this person. Like, it is a conscious issue. So I do think we should have, absolutely, the system that exists is not fair. It is not reflective of this country. So we absolutely need a complete and total remodel. of the system. And I think when we have that remodel, a reflective democracy, policies that are just, that are community centered, I think we will have more of our people willing to run, because it won't feel like such a huge conflict of our own moral compass and the reason why we want to be in service, which is to be in service to our community and not service to special interests. I think that's a really big issue.
Yeah, I just want to add, like, being in a state like Louisiana, who we have a Democratic governor that may as well be Republican, um, who talks a lot about his views and his choices that his family has made, and he's pro-police, by the way. He's the one that came up with the Blue Lives Matter bill some years ago. But when you have, I feel like there's no one. I absolutely feel like there's no one that I know that's running right now that's going to speak the language we want to hear. Not here in Louisiana. I don't feel that way. I realize there's some races coming up that we'll have to be involved in. But like Paris said, it's like I feel like we do ourselves a disservice when we get behind a candidate that we really don't want. We've done it time and time again, and it never works for us. It never works out in our favor. And the women that we have in office here are just as conservative, and they could be Democrat or Republican here. And so I haven't seen anybody coming up in the next few years that could run. I agree with Paris that something has to change about the way we do this political thing, who gets to run, who gets to stay in office, and the way they stay in office, and the deals that they make that are not on our side, even with candidates we do want. Here in Louisiana, if it's a candidate that the people want, you're almost afraid to really say it, because they won't last, because something is going to happen, or they come up with indictments. In Louisiana, we're good for trying to figure out who's crooked. And we just had that with the DA's race, right? The DA that's
Right.
the side of the people, that we have seen that this doesn't work. They'll come up with ways to try to get you out of the race or get you out of office, if they feel like you're gonna vote or lead in the way that community and people want you to.
So what does that mean? Let's say you've got 10 years to restructure something, to figure out, where do you start?
I think there's a lot of, so while what we're saying is, hey, this system that's been put in place by these white dudes, I think they did just release that there's more millionaires in Congress than there's like millionaires. These people are like overwhelmingly they have aged out, not because they literally have been there for 40 years.
Yeah.
I think it's time for you to try something else, right? I think there's some things that will require structuring that is happening on some of the local and state levels. In Georgia, we do have some exciting things. We have exciting people running for races, right? In some of our smaller cities, right? We are seeing people willing to experiment. Atlanta just passed an abortion fund, right? We're seeing people try things, go up against the status quo. What we know is that it will require big minds, big visioning. And this is literally what all of us bring, right? But we have to be willing to build something, build the thing that we want. So I do think that we should have a really exciting, juicy project, of innovation, visioning space around what would it really take? What needs to be put in place, right? To restructure the current system that makes it reflective, right? So that really says the barrier to run for elections need to be literally, it has to be capped, right? Like campaign reform, there really has to be these structures put in place so that there can be some new energy, some new ways of being. And I actually think that so much of our time has been around fighting what's terrible, and not as much time around visioning in the next 25 years. How do we want this democratic project to look? And so I think it's going to take more than 10. I think in 10, we can make some magic happen. But in 25 years, if we say, okay, this is our project, we actually want to restructure it. And what do we want this structure to look like? We want people who are not just like, they are, you know, they are same race, right? Because we've done that. We need people who have our same politics, right? Who really are going to be held accountable, right? And that actually is more reflective of working class people, of Black people, of, you know, of working moms, of queer and trans people. We need those people to be in the place. And not only do we need them to be in the place, we need the system to be different so they can actually do the work that we sent them to do.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I totally agree. Yeah, I think it would take 25 years. I don't know about anywhere else, but I know in Louisiana, I would need 25 years, if not 30. When you think about Louisiana's makeup. But I think that's the beauty of this work, as difficult as it is some of us do get to dream and imagine what we'd like to see. And also how we support our candidates when they are doing what we need them to do, right? Like, I don't think those who are trying get enough support around, like, this is what the community is saying they want.
Yes.
I don't see enough of that either. So yeah, I think we need a long-term strategy. I totally agree with Paris about how we need to be able to dream and help our communities and the people we work with dream about what they want to see as well.
And luckily, we have so many people in the reproductive justice movement, so many Black leaders who are just coming in. So if this is not the work that we will close the gap on, I think we will help close it. We should rest assured that there is a generation and generations after who will be forwarding a new agenda, bigger, bolder than we could have ever imagined, that they will get this done. As we have inherited the work of our Black feminist North Stars, from our Black liberation people, they gave us the baton and we have forwarded past their wildest dreams. There is this generation, there's us still now, I'm still in this fight, that will get us as far as we need to go, and it will continue to get broader, bigger, more vibrant and juicier. We will get there. It will take time. We need resources. We need the investment now, right? So whatever money and resource, like, we need that money yesterday, give it now, like, and give 100 times more so that we can actually do this work. A lot of the work that we're doing is catch up, right? Like, we are literally catching up from the lack of investment. And we've never had the pure investment in our work for us to push as hard as we need to. So let's be honest, is that we've not been given the same resources to fight the same fight.
No.
The right has so much more resources than we do. We oftentimes don't talk about that.
Yeah, especially in the state. I feel like throughout the South, one of the things that we're constantly battling is if a resource comes here, when they feel like, you know, and they may invest 2 to 5 years, and then some of them have been out because they feel like it didn't change quick enough. And you can't change hundreds of years of white supremacy in 2 to 5 years. It doesn't happen like that. It doesn't work like that, right? So I feel like that's a very important piece. And even in this moment that we're in, people are talking about resources in the South and what it means to, like, if they're going to stay. And it was like, really, this is not the time for you to leave. This is a time for you to make a larger and bigger investment than you ever dreamed of, because this is the fight. I feel like Paris is absolutely right. We've been playing catch up the whole time. I thought I was fighting. I thought I was fighting at some of the issues, but really I realized that, oh my God, like, we are just getting started. We're just getting started.
And you're working at, so what I'm hearing is it starts at the local level, and we've got to inspire young people to get involved, to stay involved, that next generation and that next generation below them to stay involved, that there needs to be more resources. And in many ways, you know, Black women have fought for decades and not had the resources and had to put their own resources into things. I mean, I look at all the different organizations that were started around somebody's kitchen table and literally depended on the sweat and work of Black women to build those organizations and continue to build them. And the fact that, again, those elected officials who we support and we continue to support are those that we grew, that grew in our neighborhoods and that we trust, and that those are the people who we want to see more of and that we want to keep moving. And again, it still comes down to finding those people, voting for them, holding them accountable, all the things that all of you are said. And unfortunately, we are out of time. So I want to just wrap up and say, once again, this has always been, I always like talking to you too, because you bring some reality to our politics and to our organizing and to our thought. And I want to thank both of you for coming on and talking, especially about, because what I'm hearing is organizing. We've got to do some organizing, and it's got to be at the local level to grow into the state level and grow nationally. So many of our repro organizations that are not reproductive justice focus so much on federal pieces that they forgot and didn't understand that while they were fighting on this federal piece and waiting for, and hoping that, the Supreme Court was always going to be the savior, we were fighting at the local level, watching these states just erode our rights over and over again. And that's where all of a sudden now they woke up and said, oh my God, it's at the state level. And you kind of think, did we not tell you that 10 years ago? Did we not tell you 5 years ago? I remember convening a meeting of reproductive health rights and justice groups to talk about the future of Roe 5 years ago. And people were so busy fighting about money that they could not come up with a strategy because they didn't believe it until Trump got elected. And then it was like, oh my God, because everybody was convinced Clinton was going to win. And then instead, Trump won. And it was like, we're in trouble. And so here we've got these Supreme Court justices who basically decided to act as legislators and threw out a constitutional right, The last time that happened was the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act, a constitutional right to protect us to be able to vote. So it's not an unusual thing. And so you're right. We've got a lot of work to do. And, the people who come next under us have a lot of work to do. And this is a long time fight, but it does need to be a strategic fight. It needs to be one of those kind of fights that is going to actually mean something, that we're going to eventually see people in those positions as what you said, a reflective democracy.
Okay, we have to stop now. Thank you, Marcela. Deon, it's always a pleasure.
I love you so much.
Love you too. See
All right.
you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Paris and Deon, I want to thank you very much for taking time to talk with us today. Please let everyone know where folks can connect and with you and the important work that you're doing with your organizations. And there's Black Feminist Futures up on our screen, and Women with a Vision as well. This is where you can get more information on Women with a Vision. And I also want to ask folks to follow us at Black RJ on, it's Black Women's RJ on Twitter, Facebook, and we'll be back again Thursday, September 23rd to talk about voting rights extensively and the importance of being a reproductive justice voter. And again, thank you for participating.